14.3 Problem Solving and Decision-Making in Groups. Learning objectives. Number 1, discuss the common components and characteristics of problems. Number 2, explain the 5 steps of the group's problem-solving process. Number 3, describe the brainstorming and discussion that should take place before the group makes a decision. Number 4, compare and contrast the different decision-making techniques. And number 5, discuss the various influences on decision-making. Although the steps of problem-solving and decision-making that we will discuss next may seem obvious, we often don't think to, or choose not to, use them. Instead, we start working on a problem and later realize we are lost and have to backtrack. I'm sure we've all reached a point in a project or task and had the "okay, now what" moment. I've recently taken up some carpentry projects as a functional hobby, and I have developed a great respect for the importance of advanced planning. It's frustrating to get a crucial point in building or fixing something, only to realize that you have to unscrew a support board that you already screwed in, have to drive back to the hardware store to get something that you didn't think to get earlier, or have to completely start over. In this section, we will discuss the group problem-solving process, methods of decision-making, and influences on these processes. Heading: Group Problem-Solving. The problem-solving process involves thoughts, discussions, actions, and decisions that occur from the first consideration of a problematic situation to the goal. The problems that groups face are varied, but some common problems include budgeting funds, raising funds, planning events, addressing customer or citizen complaints, creating or adapting products or services to fit needs, supporting members, and raising awareness about issues or causes. Problems of all sorts have 3 common components. Number 1, an undesirable situation. When conditions are desirable, there isn't a problem. Number 2, a desired situation. Even though it may only be a vague idea, there is a drive to better the undesirable situation. The vague idea may develop into a more precise goal that can be achieved, although solutions are not yet generated. Number 3, obstacles between undesirable and desirable situations. These are things that stand in the way between the current situation and the group's goal of addressing it. This component of a problem requires the most work, and it is the part where decision-making occurs. Some examples of obstacles include limited funding, resources, personnel, time, or information. Obstacles can also take the form of people who are working against the group, including people resistant to change or people who disagree. Discussion of these 3 elements of a problem helps the group tailor its problem-solving process, as each problem will vary. While these 3 general elements are present in each problem, the group should also address specific characteristics of the problem. 5 common and important characteristics to consider are task difficulty, number of possible solutions, group member interest in a problem, group member familiarity with problem, and the need for solution acceptance. Number 1, task difficulty. Difficult tasks are also typically more complex. Groups should be prepared to spend time researching and discussing a difficult and complex task in order to develop a shared foundational knowledge. This typically requires individual work outside the group and frequent group meetings to share information. Number 2, number of possible solutions. There are usually multiple ways to solve a problem or complete a task, but some problems have more potential solutions than others. Figuring out how to prepare a bench, or rather a beach house, for an approaching hurricane is fairly complex and difficult. But there are still a number of things to do. For example, taping and boarding up windows, turning off water, electricity, and gas, trimming trees, and securing loose outside objects. Other problems may be more creatively based. For example, designing a new restaurant may entail using some standard solutions, but could also entail many different types of innovation with layout and design. Group member interest in a problem. When group members are interested in the problem, they will be more engaged with the problem-solving process and invested in finding a quality solution. Groups with high interest in and knowledge about the problem may want more freedom to develop and implement solutions, while groups with low interest may prefer a leader who provides structure and direction. Group familiarity with problem. Some groups encounter a problem regularly, while other problems are more unique or unexpected. A family who has lived in Hurricane Alley for decades probably has a better idea of how to prepare its house for a hurricane than does a family that just recently moved from the Midwest. Many groups that rely on funding have to revisit a budget every year. And in recent years, groups have had to get more creative with budgets as funding has been cut in nearly every sector. When group members aren't familiar with a problem, they will need to do background research on what similar groups have done and may also need to bring in outside experts. Need for solution acceptance. In this step, groups must consider how many people the decision will affect and how much buy in from others the group needs in order for their solution to be successfully implemented. Some small groups may have stakeholders on whom the success of a solution depends. Other groups are answerable only to themselves. When a small group is planning on building a new park in a crowded neighborhood or implementing a new policy in a large business, it can be very difficult to develop solutions that will be accepted by all. In such cases, groups will want to poll those who will be affected by the solution and may want to do a pilot implementation to see how people react. Imposing an excellent solution that doesn't have buy in from stakeholders can still lead to failure. Heading: Groups problem solving process. There are several variations of similar problem solving models based on U.S. American scholar John Dewey's reflective thinking process. As you read through the steps in the process, think about how you can apply what we learned regarding the general and specific elements of problems. Some of the following steps are straightforward and are things we would logically do when faced with a problem. However, taking a deliberate and systematic approach to problem solving has been shown to benefit group functioning and performance. A deliberate approach is especially beneficial for groups that do not have an established history of working together or will only be able to meet occasionally. Although a group should attend to each step of the process, group leaders or other group members who facilitate problem solving should be cautious not to dogmatically follow each element of the process or force a group along. Such a lack of flexibility could limit group member input and negatively affect the group's cohesion and climate. Step 1. Define the problem. Define the problem by considering the three elements shared by every problem: the current undesirable situation, the goal or more desirable situation, and the obstacles in the way. At this stage, group members share what they know about the current situation without proposing solutions or evaluating the information. Here are some good questions to ask during the stage. What is the current difficulty? How did we come to know that the difficulty exists? Who, what is involved? Why is it meaningful, urgent, important? What have the effects been so far? What, if any, elements of the difficulty require clarification? At the end of the stage, the group should be able to compose a single sentence that summarizes the problem called a problem statement. Avoid wording in the problem statement or question that hints at potential solutions. A small group formed to investigate ethical violations of city officials could use the following problem statement. Our state does not currently have a mechanism for citizens to report suspected ethical violations by city officials. Heading: Step 2. Analyze the problem. During this step, a group should analyze the problem and the group's relationship to the problem. Whereas the first step involving exploring the what related to the problem, this step focuses on the why. At this stage, group members can discuss the potential causes of the difficulty. Group members may also want to begin setting out an agenda or timeline for the group's problem-solving process, looking forward to the other steps. To fully analyze the problem, the group can discuss the 5 common problem variables discussed before. Here are 2 examples of questions that the group formed to address ethics violations might ask. Why doesn't our city have an ethics reporting mechanism? Do cities of similar size have such a mechanism? Once the problem has been analyzed, the group can pose a problem question that will guide the group as it generates possible solutions. How can citizens report suspected ethical violations of city officials, And how will such reports be processed and addressed? As you can see, the problem question is more complex than the problem statement. Since the group has moved on to more in-depth discussion of the problem during Step 2. Heading, Step 3, generate possible solutions. During this step, group members generate possible solutions to the problem. Again, solutions should not be evaluated at this point, only proposed and clarified. The question should be, what could we do to address this problem, not what should we do to address it. It is perfectly okay for a group member to question another person's idea by asking something like, "What do you mean?" Or, "Could you explain your reasoning more?" Discussions at this stage may reveal a need to return to previous steps to better define and more fully analyze a problem. Since many problems are multifaceted, it is necessary for group members to generate solutions for each part of the problem separately, making sure to have multiple solutions for each part. Stopping the solution generating process prematurely can lead to groupthink. For the problem question previously posed, the group would need to generate solutions for all three parts of the problem included in the question. Possible solutions for the first part of the problem: how can citizens report ethical violations? May include online reporting system, email, in person, anonymously, on the record, and so on. Possible solutions for the second part of the problem: how will reports be processed? May include daily by a newly appointed ethics officer, weekly by a nonpartisan non-government employee, and so on. Possible solutions for the third part of the problem: how will reports be addressed? May include by a newly appointed ethics commission, by the accused's supervisor, by the city manager, and so on. Heading, Step 4, evaluate solutions. During this step, solutions can be critically evaluated based on their credibility, completeness, and worth. Once the potential solutions have been narrowed based on more obvious differences in relevance and/or merit, the group should analyze each solution based on its potential effects, especially negative effects. Groups that are required to report the rationale for their decision, or whose decisions may be subject to public scrutiny, would be wise to make a set list of criteria for evaluating each solution. Additionally, solutions can be evaluated based on how well they fit with the group's charge and abilities of the group. To do this, group members may ask, does this solution live up to the original purpose or mission of the group? And can the solution actually be implemented with our current resources and connections? And how will this solution be supported, funded, enforced, and assessed? Secondary tensions and substantive conflict. Two concepts discussed earlier emerge during this step of problem solving, and group members will need to employ effective critical thinking and listening skills. Decision-making is part of the larger process of problem solving, and it plays a prominent role in this step. While there are several fairly similar models for problem solving, there are many varied decision-making techniques that groups can use. For example, to narrow the list of proposed solutions, group members may decide by majority vote, by weighing the pros and cons, or by discussing them until a consensus is reached. There are also more complex decision-making models like the six hats method, which we will discuss later. Once the final decision is reached, the group leader or facilitator should confirm that the group is in agreement. It may be beneficial to let the group break for a while, or even to delay the final decision until a later meeting to allow time to evaluate it outside of the group context. Heading, Step 5, implement and assess the solution. Implementing the solution requires some advanced planning, and it should not be rushed unless the group is operating under strict time restraints, or delay may lead to some kind of harm. Although some solutions can be implemented immediately, others may take days, months, or years. As was noted earlier, it may be beneficial for groups to poll those who will be affected by the solution as to their opinion of it, or even to do a pilot test to observe the effectiveness of the solution and how people react to it. Before implementation, groups should also determine how and when they would assess the effectiveness of the solution by asking, how will we know the solution is working? Since solution assessment may vary based on whether or not the group is disbanded, groups should also consider the following questions. If the group disbands after implementation, who will be responsible for assessing the solution? If the solution fails, will the same group reconvene, or will a new group be formed? Certain elements of the solution may need to be delegated out to various people inside and outside the group. Group members may also be assigned to implement a particular part of the solution based on their role in the decision making or because it connects to their area of expertise. Likewise, group members may be tasked with publicizing the solution or selling it to a particular group of shareholders. Last, the group should consider its future. In some cases, the group will decide to stay together and continue working on other tasks, or if it will disband. In other cases, outside forces may determine the group's fate. Heading: Decision making in groups. We all engage in personal decision making. And we all know that some decisions are more difficult than others. When we make decisions in groups, we face some challenges that we do not face in our personal decision making. But we also stand to benefit from some advantages of group decision making. Group decision making can appear fair and democratic, but really only be a gesture that covers up the fact that certain group members or the group leader may have already decided. Group decision making also takes more time than individual decisions and can be burdensome if some group members do not do their assigned work, divert the group with self centered or unproductive role behaviors, or miss meetings. Conversely, though, group decisions are often more informed since all group members develop a shared understanding of a problem through discussion and debate. The shared understanding may also be more complex and deep than what an individual would develop because the group members are exposed to a variety of viewpoints that can broaden their own perspectives. Group decisions also benefit from synergy, one of the key advantages of group communication that we discussed earlier. Most groups do not use a specific method of decision making, perhaps thinking that they'll work things out as they go. This can lead to unequal participation, social loafing, premature decisions, prolonged discussion, and a host of other negative consequences. So, in this section, we will learn some practices that will prepare us for good decision making and some specific techniques we can use to help us reach a final decision. Heading: Brainstorming before decision making. Before groups can make a decision, they need to generate possible solutions to their problem. The most commonly used method is brainstorming, although most people don't follow the recommended steps of brainstorming. As you'll recall, brainstorming refers to the quick generation of ideas free of judgment and evaluation. The originator of the term brainstorming said the following four rules must be followed for the technique to be effective. Evaluation of ideas is forbidden. Wild and crazy ideas are encouraged. Quantity of ideas, not quality, is the goal. New combinations of ideas presented are encouraged. To make brainstorming more of a decision-making method rather than an idea-generated method, group communication scholars have suggested additional steps that precede and follow brainstorming. Number one, do a warm-up brainstorming session. Some people are more apprehensive about publicly communicating their ideas than others are, and a warm-up session can help ease apprehension and prime group members for task-related idea generation. The warm-up can be initiated by anyone in the group and should only go on for a few minutes. To get things started, the person should ask, or could, if our group formed a band, what would we be called? What other purposes could a mailbox serve? In the previous examples, the first warm-up gets the group's more abstract creative juices flowing, while the second focuses more on practical and concrete ideas. Do the actual brainstorming session. Number two. This session shouldn't last more than 30 minutes and should follow the four rules of brainstorming mentioned previously. To ensure that the fourth rule is realized, the facilitator could encourage people to piggyback off each other's ideas. Eliminate duplicate ideas. After the brainstorming session is over, group members can eliminate, without evaluating, ideas that are the same or very similar. Clarify, organize, and evaluate ideas is number four. Before evaluation, see if any ideas need clarification. Then try to theme or group ideas together in some orderly fashion. Since wild and crazy ideas are encouraged, some suggestions may need clarification. If it becomes clear that there isn't really a foundation to an idea and that it is too vague or abstract and can't be clarified, it may be eliminated. As a caution, though, it may be wise to not throw out all the off the wall ideas that are hard to categorize and to instead put them in a miscellaneous or wild and crazy category. Heading: Discussion before decision making. The nominal group technique guides decision making through a four-step process that includes idea generation and evaluation and seeks to elicit equal contributions from all group members. This method is useful because the procedure involves all group members systematically, which fixes the problem of uneven participation during discussions. Since everyone discusses and rather contributes to the discussion, this method can also help reduce instances of social loafing. To use the nominal group technique, do the following. Number one, silently and individually list ideas. Number two, create a master list of ideas. Number three, clarify ideas as needed. And number four, take a secret vote to rank group members' acceptance of ideas. During the first step, have group members work quietly in the same space. To write down every idea, they have to address the task or problem they face. This shouldn't take more than 20 minutes. Whoever is facilitating the discussion should remind group members to use brainstorming techniques, which means they shouldn't evaluate ideas as they are generated. And group members to remain silent once they've finished their list so they do not distract others. During the second step, the facilitator goes around the group in a consistent order, asking each person to share one idea at a time. As the idea is shared, the facilitator records it on a master list that everyone can see. Keep track of how many times each idea comes up, as that could be an idea that warrants more discussion. Continue this process until all the ideas have been shared. As a note to facilitators, some group members may begin to edit their list or self-censor when asked to provide one of their ideas. To limit a person's apprehension with sharing his or her ideas, and to ensure that each idea is shared, I have asked group members to exchange lists with someone else so they can share ideas from the list they receive without fear of being personally judged. During step 3, the facilitator should note that group members can now ask for clarification on ideas on the master list. Do not let this discussion stray into evaluation of ideas. To help avoid an unnecessarily long discussion, it may be useful to go from one person to the next to ask which ideas need clarifying, and then go to the originator of the idea in question for clarification. During the fourth step, members use a voting ballot to rank the acceptability of the ideas on the master list. If the list is long, you may ask group members to rank only their top 5 or so choices. The facilitator then takes up the secret ballots and reviews them in random order, noting the rankings of each idea. Ideally, the highest ranked idea can then be discussed and decided on. The nominal group technique does not carry a group all the way through to the point of decision. Rather, it sets the group up for a roundtable discussion or use of some other method to evaluate the merits of the top ideas. Heading: Specific decision-making techniques. Some decision-making techniques involve determining a course of action based on the level of agreement among the group members. These methods include majority, expert, authority, and consensus rule. Majority rule, well, it's a commonly used decision-making technique in which a majority, 1/2 plus 1, must agree before a decision is made. A show of hands vote, a paper ballot, or an electronic voting system can determine the majority choice. Many decision-making bodies, including the House of Representatives, Senate, and Supreme Court, use majority rule to make decisions, which shows that it is often associated with democratic decision-making, since each person gets one vote and each vote counts equally. Of course, other individuals and mediated messages can influence a person's vote, but since the voting power is spread out over all the group members, it is not easy for one person or party to take control of the decision-making process. In some cases, for example, to override a presidential veto or amend the Constitution, a supermajority of two-thirds may be required to make a decision. Minority rule is a decision-making technique in which a designated authority or expert has final say over a decision and may or may not consider the input of other group members. When a designated expert makes a decision by minority rule, there may be buy-in from other members in the group, especially if the members of the group didn't have relevant knowledge or experience or expertise. When a designated authority makes decisions, buy-in will vary based on group members' level of respect for the authority. For example, decisions made by an elected authority may be more accepted by those who elected him or her than by those who didn't. As with majority rule, this technique can be time-saving. Unlike majority rule, one person or party can have control over the decision-making process. This type of decision-making is more similar to that used by monarchs and dictators. An obvious negative consequence of this method is that the needs or wants of one person can override the needs and wants of the majority. A minority deciding for the majority has led to negative consequences throughout history. The white Afrikaner minority that ruled South Africa for decades instituted apartheid, which was a system of racial segregation that disenfranchised and oppressed the majority population. The quality of that decision and its fairness really depends on the designated expert or authority. Consensus rule is a decision-making technique in which all members of the group must agree on the same decision. On rare occasions, a decision may be ideal for all group members, which can lead to unanimous agreement without further debate and discussion. Although this can be positive, be cautious that this isn't a sign of groupthink. More typically, consensus is reached only after lengthy discussion. On the plus side, consensus often leads to high-quality decisions due to the time and effort it takes to get everyone in agreement. Group members are also more likely to be committed to the decision because of their investment in reaching it. On the negative side, the ultimate decision is often one that all group members can live with, but not one that's ideal for all members. Additionally, the process of arriving at consensus also includes conflict, as people debate ideas and negotiate the interpersonal tensions that may result. Heading: Influences on decision-making. Many factors influence the decision-making process. For example, how might a group's independence or access to resources affect the decisions they make? What potential advantages and disadvantages come with decisions made by groups that are more or less similar in terms of personality and cultural identities? In this section, we will explore how situational, personality, and cultural influences affect decision-making in groups. Heading: Situational influences on decision-making. A group's situational context affects decision-making. One key situational element is the degree of freedom that the group has to make its own decisions, secure its own resources, and initiate its own actions. Some groups have to go through multiple approval processes before they can do anything, while others are self-directed, self-governing, and self-sustaining. Another situational influence is uncertainty. In general, groups deal with more uncertainty in decision-making than do individuals because of the increased number of variables that comes with adding more people to a situation. Individual group members can't know what other group members are thinking, whether or not they're doing their work, or how committed they are to the group. So the size of the group is a powerful situational influence, as it adds to uncertainty and complicates communication. Access to information also influences a group. First, the nature of the group's task or problem affects its ability to get information. Group members can more easily make decisions about a problem when other groups have similarly experienced it. Even if the problem is complex and serious, the group can learn from other situations and apply what it learns. Second, the group must have access to flows of information. Access to archives, electronic databases, and individuals with relevant experience is necessary to obtain any relevant information about similar problems or to do research on a new or unique problem. In this regard, group members' formal and informal network connections also become important situational factors. The origin and urgency of a problem are also situational factors that influence decision making. In terms of origin, problems usually occur in one of four ways. Number one, something goes wrong. Group members must decide how to fix or stop something. Example, a firehouse crew finds out that half of the building is contaminated with mold and must be closed down. Number two, expectations change or increase. Group members must innovate more efficient or effective ways of doing something. Example, a firehouse crew finds out that the district they're responsible for is being expanded. Number three, something goes wrong and expectations change or increase. Group members must fix, stop, or become efficient, effective. Example, the firehouse crew has to close half the building and must start responding to more calls due to the expanding district. Number four, the problem existed from the beginning. Group members must go back to the origins of the situation and walk through the analysis and analyze the steps, again, to decide what can be done differently. Example, a firehouse crew has consistently had to work with minimal resources in terms of building space and firefighting tools. In each of the cases, the need for a decision may be more or less urgent, depending on how badly something is going wrong, how high the expectations have been raised, or the degree to which people are fed up with a broken system. Decisions must be made in situations ranging from crisis level to mundane. Heading: Personality influences on decision making. A long-studied typology of value orientations that affect decision making consists of the following types of decision maker: the economic, the aesthetic, the theoretical, the social, the political, and the religious. The economic decision maker makes decisions based on what is practical and useful. The aesthetic decision maker makes decisions based on form and harmony, desiring a solution that is elegant and in sync with the surroundings. The theoretical decision maker wants to discover the truth through rationality. The social decision maker emphasizes the personal impact of a decision and sympathizes with those who may be affected by it. The political decision maker is interested in power and influence and views people and or property as divided into groups that have different value. The religious decision maker seeks to identify with a larger purpose, works to unify others under that goal, and commits to a viewpoint, often denying one side and being dedicated to the other. In the United States, economic, political, and theoretical decision-making tend to be more prevalent decision-making orientations, which likely corresponds to the individualistic cultural orientation with its emphasis on competition and efficiency. But situational context, as we discussed before, can also influence our decision-making. The personalities of group members, especially leaders and other active members, affect the climate of the group. The group member personalities can be categorized based on where they fall on a continuum anchored by the following descriptors: dominant, submissive; friendly, unfriendly; and instrumental, emotional. The more group members there are in any extreme of these categories, the more likely that the group climate will also shift to resemble those characteristics. Dominant versus submissive. Group members that are more dominant act more independently and direct, initiate conversations, take up more space, make more direct eye contact, seek leadership positions, and take control over decision-making processes. Most, or rather more, submissive members are reserved, contribute to the group only when asked to, avoid eye contact, and leave their personal needs and thoughts unvoiced to give into the suggestions of others. Friendly versus unfriendly. Group members on the friendly side of the continuum find a balance between talking and listening. Don't try to win at the expense of other group members, are flexible but not weak, and value democratic decision-making. Unfriendly group members are disagreeable, indifferent, withdrawn, and selfish, which leads them to either not invest in decision-making or direct it in their own interest rather than in the interest of the group. Instrumental versus emotional. Instrumental group members are emotionally neutral, objective, analytical, task-oriented, and committed followers, which leads them to work hard and contribute to the group's decision making as long as it is orderly and follows agreed on rules. Emotional group members are creative, playful, independent, unpredictable, and expressive, which leads them to make rash decisions, resist group norms or decision making structures, and switch often from relational to task focus. Heading, cultural context, and decision making. Just like neighborhoods, schools, and countries, small groups vary in terms of their degree of similarity and difference. Demographic changes in the United States and increases in technology can bring different people together, make it more likely that we will be interacting in more and more heterogeneous groups and groups. Some small groups are more homogeneous, meaning the members are more similar, and some are more heterogeneous, meaning the members are more different. Diversity and difference within groups has advantages and disadvantages. In terms of advantages, research finds that in general, that are culturally heterogeneous have better overall performance than more homogeneous groups. Additionally, when group members have time to get to know each other and competently communicate across their differences, the advantages of diversity include better decision making due to different perspectives. Unfortunately, groups then often operate under time constraints and other pressures that make the possibility for intercultural dialogue and understanding difficult. The main disadvantage of heterogeneous groups is the possibility for conflict. But given that all groups experience conflict, this isn't solely due to the presence of diversity. We will now look more specifically at how some of the cultural value orientations we've learned about already in this book can play out in groups with international diversity, and how domestic diversity in terms of demographics can also influence group decision making. Heading: International diversity in group interactions. Cultural value orientations such as individualism, collectivism, power distance, and high-low context communication styles all manifest on a continuum of communication behaviors and can influence group decision making. Group members from individualistic cultures are more likely to value task-oriented, efficient, and direct communication. This could manifest in behaviors such as dividing up tasks into individual projects before collaboration begins and then openly debating ideas during discussion and decision making. Additionally, people from cultures that value individualism are more likely to openly express dissent from a decision, essentially expressing their disagreement with the group. Group members from collectivist cultures are more likely to value relationships over the task at hand. Because of this, they are also tend to value conformity and face-saving, often indirect, communication. This could manifest in behaviors such as establishing norms that include periods of socializing to build relationships before task-oriented communication, like negotiations begin, or norms that limit public disagreement in favor of more indirect communication that doesn't challenge the face of other group members or the group's leader. In a group composed of people from a collectivist culture, each member would likely play harmonizing roles, looking for signs of conflict and resolving them before they become public. Power distance can also affect group interactions. Some cultures rank higher or power distance scales, meaning they value hierarchy, make decisions based on status, and believe that people have a set place in society that is fairly unchangeable. Group members from high power distance cultures would likely appreciate a strong, designated leader who exhibits a more directive leadership style and prefer groups in which members have clear and assigned roles. In a group that is homogeneous in terms of having a high power distance orientation, members with higher status would be able to openly provide information, and those with lower status may not provide information unless a higher status member explicitly seeks it from them. Low power distance cultures do not place as much value and meaning on status and believe that all group members can participate in decision making. Group members from low power distance cultures would likely freely speak their mind during a group meeting and prefer a participative leadership style. How much meaning is conveyed through the context surrounding verbal communication and can also affect group communication. Some cultures have a high context communication style in which much of the meaning in an interaction is conveyed through context, such as nonverbal cues and silence. Group members from high context cultures may avoid saying something directly, assuming that other group members will understand the intended meaning even if the message is indirect. So if someone disagrees with a proposed course of action, he or she may say, "Let's discuss this tomorrow," and mean, "I don't think we should do this." Such indirect communication is also a face saving strategy that is common in collectivist cultures. Other cultures have a low context communication style that places more importance on the meaning conveyed through words than through context or nonverbal cues. Group members from low context cultures often say what they mean and mean what they say. For example, if someone doesn't like an idea, they might say, "I think we should consider more options. This one doesn't seem like the best we can do." In any of these cases, an individual from one culture operating in a group with people of a different cultural orientation could adapt to the expectations of the host culture, especially if that person possesses a high degree of intercultural communication competence, ICC. Additionally, people with high ICC can adapt to a group member with a different cultural orientation than the host culture, even though these cultural orientations connect to values that affect our communication in fairly consistent ways. Individuals may exhibit different communication behaviors depending on their own individual communication style and the situation. Heading: Domestic diversity and group communication. While it is becoming more likely that we will interact in small groups with international diversity, we are guaranteed to interact in groups that are diverse in terms of cultural identities found within a single country or the subcultures found within a larger cultural group. Gender stereotypes sometimes influence the roles that people play within a group. For example, the stereotype that women are more nurturing than men may lead group members, both male and female, to expect that women will play the role of supporters or harmonizers within the group. Since women have primarily performed secretarial work since the 1900s, it may be expected that women play the role of recorder. In both of these cases, stereotypical notions of gender place women in roles that are typically not as valued in group communication. The opposite is true for men. In terms of leadership, despite notable exceptions, research shows that men fill an overwhelmingly disproportionate amount of leadership positions. We are socialized to see certain behaviors by men as indicative of leadership abilities, even though they may not be. For example, men are often perceived to contribute more to a group because they tend to speak first when asked a question, or to fill a silence and are perceived to talk more about task related matters than relationally oriented matters. Both of these tendencies create a perception that men are more engaged with the task. Men are also socialized to be more competitive and self congratulatory, meaning that their communication may be seen as dedicated and their behavior seen as powerful. And that when their work isn't noticed, they will be more likely to make it known to the group rather than take silent credit. Even though we know that the relational elements of a group are crucial for success, even in high performance teams, that work is not as valued in our society as the task related work. Despite the fact that some communication patterns and behaviors related to our typical and stereotypical gender socialization affect how we interact in and form perceptions of others in groups. The differences in group communication that used to be attributed to gender in early group communication research seems to be diminishing. This is likely due to the changing organizational cultures from which much group work emerges, which have now had more than 60 years to adjust to women in the workplace. It is also due to a more nuanced understanding of gender based research, which doesn't take a stereotypical view from the beginning as many of the early male researchers did. Now, instead of biological sex being assumed as a factor that creates inherent communication differences, group communication scholars see that men and women both exhibit a range of behaviors that are more or less feminine or masculine. It is these gendered behaviors and not a person's gender that seem to have more influence on perceptions of group communication. Interestingly, group interactions are still masculinist in that male and female group members prefer a more masculine communication style for task leaders, and that both males and females in this role are more likely to adapt to a more masculine communication style. Conversely, men who take on social emotional leadership behaviors adopt a more feminine communication style. In short, it seems that although masculine communication traits are often associated with high status positions in groups, both men and women adapt to this expectation and are evaluated similarly. Other demographic categories are also influenced in group communication and decision making. In general, group members have an easier time communicating when they are more similar than different in terms of race and age. This ease of communication can make group work more efficient, but the homogeneity may sacrifice some creativity. As we learned earlier, groups that are diverse benefit from the diversity of perspectives in terms of the quality of decision making and creativity of output. In terms of age, for the first time since industrialization began, it is common to have three generations of people and sometimes four working side by side in an organizational setting. Although four generations often worked together in early factories, they were segregated based on their age group, and hierarchy existed with older workers at the top and younger workers at the bottom. Today, however, generations interact regularly, and it is not uncommon for an older person to have a leader or supervisor who is younger than him or her. The current generations in the workplace and occasionally in work based groups include the following: the silent generation, born between 1925 and 42, currently in their mid 60s to 80s, actually in their mid 90s to early 100s. This is the smallest generation in the workforce right now, as many have retired or left for other reasons. This generation includes people who were born during the Great Depression or the early part of World War II, many of whom later fought in the Korean War. The baby boomers, born between 1946 and 1964, currently in their late 40s to mid 60s. This is the largest generation in the workforce right now. Baby boomers are the most populous generation born in U.S. history, and they are working longer than previous generations, which means they will remain the predominant force in organizations for 10 to 20 more years. Generation X, born between 1965 and 1981. Currently in their early 30s rather, to mid 40s, this generation was the first to see technology like cell phones and the internet make its way into classrooms and our daily lives. Compared to previous generations, Gen Xers are more diverse in terms of race, religious beliefs, and sexual orientation, and also have a greater appreciation for and understanding of diversity. Generation Y, born between 1982 and 2000. Millennials, as they're also called, are currently in their late teens up to about 30 years old. The generation is not as likely to remember a time without technology, such as computers and cell phones. They are just starting to enter into the workforce and have been greatly affected by the economic crisis of the late 2000s, experiencing significantly high unemployment rates. The benefits and challenges that come with diversity of group members are important to consider. Since we will all work in diverse groups, we should be prepared to address potential challenges in order to reap the benefits. Diverse groups may be wise to coordinate a social interaction outside of group time in order to find common ground that they can then help facilitate interaction and increase group cohesion. We should be sensitive, but not let sensitivity create fear of doing something wrong that then prevents us from having meaningful interactions. Reviewing Chapter 8, Culture and Communication, will give you useful knowledge to help you navigate both international and domestic diversity and increase your communication competence in small groups and elsewhere.